I remember when I first started drawing patterns, I didn't know what I was doing. And I look now at these drawings because I still have them. And it's somebody learning and finding that with Islamic geometric design, there are so many ways to make mistakes. So many ways, you know, and that gradually I got better, but I wanted to do something that was really hard. That was part of the motivation as well, you know. I think I wanted to learn something that I thought I couldn't do, in the beginning, and still, you know, it's sometimes there are really difficult things that need to be mastered, or you need to acknowledge that you can't master them. And in the beginning it was just excitement as well, you know, to be able to create something that I thought was beautiful, but also something that has history. My name is Broug. I'm originally from Holland, but I've lived in the UK for 25 years. Nowadays I live in Yorkshire, beautiful Yorkshire. And I've dedicated all my life, all my adult life, to Islamic geometric design, Islamic architecture as well, and more generally, Islamic visual culture. And I've always been creative, but I've been creative with different aspects of all this at different stages of my life. There's been drawing, there's been writing, there's been teaching, there's been making, all these things, always. If you have a craft tradition like Islamic geometric design, it's perceived as being something, certainly in my part of the world where I'm from, as something from the past. And for me it's interesting to present something old and make it look like something new, or something from the past, make it look like something from the present. And especially with Islamic geometric design, you can do that very well. You know, just because these patterns were made in the 1500s or 1600s, they have an eternal beauty. And with the way that we can design digitally, the way that we can nowadays manufacture, it means that we can do things now that they weren't able to do in the past. So that's one of the themes that I really find interesting. Also to make it accessible for people. You know, my inclination is always to explain, to teach, to make something that maybe people think is difficult because it's got the word geometry in it, and then make it into something that everybody can do. And it's not just in what I write or what I teach, but also in the art that I make. How can I make a piece of public art, typically, and make it beautiful, but also make it educational, and to show some design principles, for example, put into practice. Initially, when I was a young man, my interest was more in history and in politics, and the only art I've really been interested in with dedication has always been Islamic art. Although, I like to go to museums and to look at paintings and, European paintings, but really a passion for me has always been for Islamic art and architecture. And the reason, sometimes it's hard for me to understand as well, because my interest came when I asked myself the question what my purpose was in this life. Right? As a young man, you wonder about these things and think, what am I going to do here on this planet? And I had this vision, this dream of what I really wanted to achieve, what I really wanted to do, and it's always been about Islamic architecture and Islamic geometric design. And what practically happened is that while I was living in Amsterdam as a student, I saw a book in a shop window, a book on Islamic geometric design, and I bought it, and I found it fascinating. But the book only showed you the result, not the process. So I taught myself. And for years and years and years in Amsterdam, I would use a compass and a ruler and try and deconstruct these patterns in order to reconstruct these patterns. And that's always been, that's how I started. I just wanted to understand it and to teach myself, which then enabled me to teach others. Inspiration is different depending on what I am doing, right? So if it's a drawing, a big drawing, then the inspiration is the desire to make something beautiful. I mean, it's always the desire to make something beautiful. The inspiration comes from anywhere, really. I mean, from nature. It really does, just from beauty in general. I like the ability to make something that will exist in the real world. I love to do that. To have something that's an idea, something that then from an idea becomes a design either by hand or digitally, and then ultimately it becomes something that people can see, like a composition or a piece of public art or a book as well. That process for me is always, I'm always motivated to do that. I didn't understand it at the time. I understand it now. I'm a religious person. It was my purpose. It was the task that was given to me by my creator. And like I said, at the time I didn't understand it. I heard it and I knew I had to do it and commit to it. There was this idea was planted in my heart of writing books in English as well, because I'm Dutch. So English is not my first language. To write books and to write a book on Islamic architecture, and I didn't know. I knew that was the prize for me when I was young. I knew that was the prize, but then the journey that I had to take to get there is not something that I could have plotted myself, because the first step of that journey was to teach myself Islamic geometric design, and the subject of geometry and maths, I mean, I'm terrible at maths. You know, it's not natural for me. Nevertheless, this is it, and so I committed to that, and I thought, well, I want to do this. I need to do this, and I will commit 100% and just not give up, basically. So that's where we are. I also wanted to see what is it really true that you can do anything that you can dream of? That also. So it's a mix of things, really. So, on the issue of total commitment, it was really the answer to a question that I asked myself and asked the universe, which is, what am I supposed to do? What is my job on this planet? What is my task on this planet? That was the question, and the answer came, and and I obeyed. Basically, that's it. For me, but for the first steps when you start a new design, generally, not just for me, but for anyone, is to not do it on the computer. Because it's good to learn by hand. There's a special joy to be had by working with your hands, for a start, but also if you design on the computer, it's always accurate and it's artificial, right? And you don't learn as much. And if you do it by hand, you struggle more, but in the process, you also learn more. It's also good just to be in the moment, right? And especially when you do geometric compositions that are quite complex, it means that you have to draw a lot of pencil lines before you can make the final composition. And there's a lesson which applies to Islamic geometric design, but also applies to life, when if you're doing something, just focus on that task in that moment, right? Because the temptation is quite often to focus on all the steps that you've already done before and to sort of imagine what it's going to look like when it's finished. But both these things are completely unhelpful when you're doing it. So the task is just to zone in and look at, okay, what do I have to do right now, so that I can go to the next step and the next step. Well, I mean, the amazing thing about Islamic geometric design is that you can design everything, in theory, with just a pair of compasses for drawing circles and a ruler for drawing lines. And complex compositions are more difficult, but in principle it's possible. And it makes sense as well, because if you think about these craftsmen over the centuries who made these compositions, these were not mathematicians, but they were people who made things with their hands. And the fascinating thing for me, and also the thing that really helps me when I teach this, is to be able to say to people, compasses and a pair of compasses and a ruler is all that you need, and you don't need to measure, you don't need to calculate, you don't need to understand maths, you just need to draw this circle now, create this intersection now, and build it up. So the beauty of it is that it makes it accessible for all. And in workshops, I find that, like I said before, people are sometimes daunted because they think it's going to be hard. You think, oh, geometry, it's going to be hard, I'm not a creative person, this and that. In reality, everybody gets a good result. And that's mainly because the tools that you use are easy to use. And you just have to take your time and be accurate. The interesting thing is that when you look at geometric patterns over the centuries, whether it's Ottoman or Mamluk in Egypt or Marinid in Morocco, it doesn't matter where, or in Iran, these patterns and these compositions have some rules that are always applied by everyone. And one of those rules is that you always make a composition to fit, which means that if you have a rectangle, for example, the composition that you make will fit perfectly into that rectangle. It's not like you make a composition and you chop it off when you run out of space. You know, that only happens in the 21st century, sadly. But traditionally, you would not do that. So any composition that you will ever see historically will be designed like that. And you can see that that's the case because on the corners of a rectangle, for example, you will have quarter stars. So it's made to measure. And the example of that blue rug in the Afghan rug shop that we visited, although that composition can be seen in more than one place, the inspiration for me was this Mamluk minbar. That Mamluk minbar, or any minbar, of course, if it has a panel on the side, it's a equilateral triangle. And that triangle will have a quarter star on the 90-degree corner and then have a section of a star on the two other angles, showing that the craftsman who made this to fit perfectly. You know, so the amount of thought that goes into that is absolutely astonishing, especially if you see how complex these compositions can be. Islamic geometric design for me has only been interesting because it allows me to create something traditional and make it look contemporary or do something new with it. And it's the same for my watercolor composition as it is for all the other things that I do. And I want it to look fresh, you know, and nowadays it's more possible to do that. There's new ways to do things that in the past you would not be able to do, and mostly that's because of digital design, but it's also because of manufacturing technologies that have improved. So for example, the big piece of public art that we saw in Dewsbury, that has been designed by a water jet cutting machine, allowing you to make it much larger scale than if you were doing it by hand, as is traditionally the case. The same is true with those carpet that I made. It's easier for us to communicate with the craftsmen in Afghanistan by just WhatsApping them and saying, look, or sending them a photo and saying, look, this is what we want to make. It's easy to interact. It makes it possible for me to create a very high quality rug with a Moroccan or Egyptian or Mamluk design, but made in Afghanistan, right? And when in history has that ever been possible? So that, for me, that's really interesting. It's, you know, it doesn't have to look contemporary for the sake of contemporary, you know. If it looks better traditional, then, you know, why change it? But if there's an opportunity to do something that just presents it in a way that makes people look at it with fresh eyes, then great. For me, it's always been something that I could give to the world. You know, it's always been something that would be hopefully, would be of benefit to others. You know, I hope it's not a selfish thing. I mean, I love it and I enjoy it, but still, you know, it's something to give. And for me, meditation doesn't come very naturally to me, you know, and art for me, creativity for me, typically is high energy. For me, art and creativity is not so much about calm. So other people will have different answers. For me, it's just a desire to make every day count, really. And you know, I've always had a job. You know, it's Islamic geometric design has never been my 100% source of revenue, because you know it's hard. So I've always had other things in my life that also occupy my time. So whenever I'm creative, I'm always, you know, try and be fast and efficient. And so not that meditative, to be honest. No, what I do does serve a greater purpose, I hope. You know, I mean, the greatest thing for me is that people find my books useful. And if I look at social media now, there are so many people on there making geometric patterns, teaching, all that stuff. And, you know, I've made a small contribution to that. And I think, great, you know, that's really a wonderful thing. And people send me emails of things that they've made, and you know, it's a privilege in that regard. So even though that's when I started, I never knew that it would become this thing. But yeah, it's amazing, really. People use my books, they find them helpful, and they like the art that I make. In my most recent book, I thank God for, you know, giving me an opportunity to write a book on Islamic architecture, right? Which is for me a very rare privilege, and there's plenty of academics around the world who could also do that, but you know, nevertheless, I'm doing it. It's miraculous to me, because every time, so I write books for a publisher in the UK called Thames and Hudson, and when I was a young man working in a bookshop in Amsterdam, that was always my favorite publisher. And for me then to be able to write not one book but 4 books for them is extraordinary, especially because, you know, English is not my first language. And every time I finish a book, I think, okay, I'm finished, right? This is, you know, this has been God's gift, this is God's plan, and now it's over. now it's finished. And then a little while later, you know, some other idea drops into my heart, and then I write that book, and then I think, okay, now I'm really finished, and then, you know, and so on, and so it goes. And we all have different gifts, right? We all have different gifts, and the important thing is not to waste your gift, and that's how I see it. And it took me a long time to come just to acknowledge that, but you know, there's some things that I am good at, and there's opportunities for me to do something with that. So for me, really, it's about understanding, trying to listen to what God is telling me, you know, and to be able to discern between something that's just a cool opportunity and something that's something real to focus on, and to listen and to act.